A Build Hatch developed production.
Hello, I'm Aaron Kyle and welcome to another episode of Build Hatch. On this week's episode, I had the opportunity to sit down with Kirby Licence, who is a building designer and architect. Kirby's design practice is called Predesigned Studio. This is a very genuine and sincere chat, so you'll really enjoy hearing Kirby's story. I particularly enjoyed how Kirby does a lot of collaborating and how she's not afraid to ask people in the industry if she needs some help or just asking a simple question. So let's get into it. Kirby Licence from Predesigned Studio, welcome to Build Hatch.
Thanks, it's good to be here.
So Kirby, like always with Build Hatch, we always take our guests all the way back to the beginning. Now, you're an architect and you own and operate a business called Predesigned Studio. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your architectural practice. But as always, we always like to go back to the beginning. So to take it back, whereabouts did you grow up?
So I grew up on the Central Coast in Fountaindale, which is sort of a semi-rural kind of area. We had a couple of acres there, mum, dad and a sister. And yeah, dad worked overseas a lot, so he was sort of gone a few weeks at a time and then home. And
so what sort of work was he involved in?
He's in IT, so ran different IT companies, worked for Compaq in the early days and then ended up working in Tokyo for sort of the later part of my growing up. So I guess when he was home, we spent a lot of family time together, going away, and then we also got the opportunity to travel a lot with him, so lots of overseas trips, which is really good. And yeah, I guess my parents split up when I was early high school, and dad was in Tokyo from then on, so I'd spend most school holidays going to Tokyo.
So I bet then he became like the cool dad where your dad was overseas every school holidays. I can go over and see him and...
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I guess I got to live like two kind of separate lives, going to Tokyo and doing all the fun things and then coming back and just going to school and doing the study and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I guess I loved architecture.
So how old were you when you sort of started to trend towards architecture, if you like?
As soon as I could draw, really.
Oh, really? So from a young age you were interested in buildings and designing stuff? Yeah,
so I always drew houses in some form or another. Usually it was a big box with lots of little boxes inside it as rooms. And yeah, cutting pictures out of magazines and making scrapbooks full of houses I liked. And I loved mum and dad taking me to exhibition homes and all of that kind of thing. And yeah, I always wanted to be either an architect or real estate or town planner, something along those lines.
So in high school, did you always know that in your final years of school that you'd be aiming for, say, architecture?
Yeah. A lot of people tried to convince me out of it, telling me there was no money in it. I didn't listen, probably should have. But yeah, that's always what I wanted to do. So it was always the goal.
I mean, architecture has so many different elements and it's such a broad term for so many little things. And I think in a nutshell, it comes back to having inspiration or having a brief and designing something for someone. That's kind of my own personal take on what architecture is. So I think if you know that and understand that, then it's one of those creative industries that has that element where money doesn't matter to some degree.
Yeah,
so you kind of go into architecture not to take home a massive salary. You go into architecture to have that inspiration, draw on the inspiration and then create something, and that's ultimately your passion for most people.
Yeah, and I guess early years of uni, it was sort of reinforced that don't do this for the money, do it because it's what makes you happy and what you love.
So did you get into architecture straight away outside of school?
Yeah. So I went to a selective high school, so I guess getting good marks was kind of assumed. I didn't actually study super hard or anything. I floated a bit through. So I originally wanted to go to Sydney, but I didn't quite get the marks to get there.
What do you need to do to get into a selective high school?
What's
your superpower?
Academics, I guess, which I find quite funny. Then I went and did architecture because I guess in high school I was all exam-based and I have a really good memory and I can write an essay and spit it out
So you always had really good marks going through school?
Yeah. I guess getting to a selective high school, then you're sort of at the best of the best. So I was sitting average for the selective school. But my mum's pretty focused on grades since we were pretty young, and she liked to extend us rather than just let us float. So
I guess with one of your parents being overseas, that has that look of I'm working hard, committing myself so you can have a really good education.
Yeah, and mum's pretty intelligent and pretty hard worker as well. So it was sort of, we'd get home from school and you didn't just get to do your schoolwork, you had to do above and beyond. And
so very disciplined upbringing.
Yeah, but fun as well. It was sort of both sides. So yeah, I guess like I was sort of just inclined to get done what I needed to get done. But I definitely slacked off in the later years.
And so did your parents, did they sort of have that influence of you doing architecture, or were they sort of saying, look, you need to do law or medicine or engineering or something?
Well, my dad actually studied architecture when he left school for 2 years. He went to UNSW, and then he left and sort of, ended up doing something completely different. So I think he was pretty excited about me doing architecture because he can kind of give me his opinion, and which sometimes drives me crazy. But I guess he has that interest too, that we can look at houses and do that kind of stuff together. And yeah, mum knew that's what I always wanted to do, so she was pretty keen. It's probably more other people that would say, oh, don't do that. Yeah, you should do law, or you should do, engineering, because it's the same thing, but you'll make more money and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I wasn't interested in doing that. I just wanted to do architecture.
So I don't need to ask whether you had the marks to get in, because clearly you did. So you went straight into architecture at university. So did you study that at Newcastle?
Yeah, so I went to Newcastle. So I started just a few weeks after I turned 18. And I kind of had the intent that I would get good enough marks in my first year to then transfer to Sydney, because that's where I wanted to be. But after a year in Newcastle, I loved it, so I didn't want to leave, so I stayed.
They have a really good facility there. And I'm a bit biased because I actually studied a little bit there as myself, and their construction management and the architecture school is really well run.
Yeah, and I think that fraternity kind of thing is good in that we have the studio environment, so you make really good friends and you're kind of all in it together. So I never really did assignment work from home. It was all done in the studio with your friends around you. And, half of it was study and half of it was mucking about and going and getting food and that kind of stuff. But it really built that community, and all of my closest friends are people that I studied with.
Do they still have that funny, weird red building that's there?
Yeah, Red Square.
The Red Square, yeah. There you go. Yep. So that's still there?
Still there, yeah. Had lectures in there. It's always freezing cold and
yeah, it's a weird
well designed.
Yeah. Okay, so studying architecture at university, what was that like?
Yeah, so it was good. The first year I was probably a bit lost. I guess I went from doing pretty book-heavy subjects in high school and lots of exams to then going to something completely creative, which going from a selective high school, I hadn't really done much creative work, so I felt pretty lost and pretty overwhelmed. But once I stuck out the first year, I kind of got more into it and formed good friendships and had some good tutors and headed in the right direction. So it was 3 years of bachelor. And then close to my end of my third year, my sister was diagnosed with bowel cancer, and she was 25, so that kind of threw a spanner in the works, I guess.
Yeah, that would have been really tough.
Yeah, so I stuck out the year, and then I took a year break and just took one subject and worked. And I guess I wasn't super excited to go back and do my master's because she was quite ill, but she didn't want her illness to sort of get in the way of me doing what I wanted to do, so she kind of insisted that I went back.
So your big sister said, I love you, but you need to continue on with your life and your studies?
Yeah. So I worked for a building designer during my third year and my year off, which was really good. That was down on the coast. a family friend who I used to babysit his kids. He was a building designer, so then he took me on doing lots of renovations, alts and ads, and a few like project home kind of jobs. So I guess that gave me just the software knowledge and how, you know, a house stands up. So that was pretty good. And then during my master's, I, again, was a bit lost. I think architecture focuses a lot on big projects, and that's sort of not where my heart's ever been. So I guess, you know, designing big libraries or museums and...
So you like the relationship side of architecture? Like
yeah, definitely.
the more purposeful use day-to-day kind of
Yeah,
use?
you know, homes for people and smaller scale. So I guess I did struggle a little bit in that big project side.
For our community of listeners who are tuning into this, an architecture degree is traditionally, 3 years to get your bachelor, which is your undergraduate.
Yeah.
And then to become a qualified architect, you then go on to do your master's to become a registered architect.
Yeah.
That's how it works, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm working towards my registration now.
So it takes, 5 years of study?
Yeah, at least 5 years.
What's involved in becoming registered?
So registered is another logbook of hours and I think there's about 10 competencies that you have to reach. So you have to do hours under a registered architect and hours you can do them self-driven, which is sort of what I'm working to now.
People probably don't realise how much of a long-term study relationship you sign up to when becoming an architect. You're talking 3 years for your undergrad, another 2 years for your master's. That's if you do it full-time.
Yep.
And then to become registered, it could be another couple of years.
Yeah, another couple of years.
So
more money, more study.
Best part of nearly a decade before you
definitely
a registered architect.
Yeah.
So I guess having that practical experience with the building designer that you were mentioning before, that would have been really handy.
Yeah, it was. I guess you come out of uni having a lot of design experience but not much technical, you know, drawing the section of a brick veneer house and that kind of really simple stuff, which you just have no idea. So that was really handy. So I think I did about 2 years there and learnt quite a lot. And then, I just wanted to find something more creative, so I started looking in Newcastle for more work. So then my fourth year, so my first year of my master's, I got a job with an interior designer in Newcastle, which again was throwing myself in the deep end because I had never done anything to do with interior design. So I got a job with Horton & Co Design, Stewart's from Sydney, and I'd worked in Sydney and come up to Newcastle. And so I spent 3 years there just...
So what sort of projects did you work on in terms of interiors?
So we mainly did like big alterations and additions jobs. So we'd also do the DA or the CDC or whatever approvals needed to be done. But it would be from, you know, doing the DA and the building design down to detailing bathrooms, kitchen joinery, and then furnishing. So I was pretty lucky with that experience. I think I learnt so much that has helped me like drive my passion for residential architecture.
So you probably didn't know it at the time, but the early days you had that practical experience with a building designer who's basically a draftsman who knows how to use the software, and they do great jobs.
Yeah.
And so you'd already had that, and then to have that then interior experience, it all just gels together, and I can see where it all ties into the residential market.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what I really love about residential architecture is you can take it from the house and the building design and getting the council approvals through to, you know, detailing the kitchen and making it a whole holistic project rather than just doing the building or just doing the interiors. So that's what I really like about residential is I can do every part of the job myself.
You basically know how all the pieces in the puzzle work and all tie in together.
Yeah.
So you were working for this interior company for a couple of years doing the interior designs. At what point did you come up with the concept for Brick Design Studio?
Yeah, so I guess I always, in the back of my head, wanted to work for myself. Probably thought that it would be a little bit further down the track. I guess I had probably a 10-year plan to work for myself after finishing uni. But I guess just situations. Once I finished uni and finished my master's, I didn't rush straight into a full-time job, which most people would go straight to a firm and go full-time and work towards registration. But with my sister being ill, that kind of wasn't really an option for me. So she was pretty ill by the time I finished uni and passed away just a few months later. So That's stayed.
Really tough.
Yeah, it was pretty tough. It was kind of a bit weird, like trying to celebrate finishing your degree and thinking about that other step. You had this massive thing going on.
And I think it's important that how that shapes your outlook on life. Like that's one of those moments that happens in your life that life's going on okay and life's going all right. And then suddenly a big hurdle like that, particularly an emotional hurdle, that pops up and that changes your whole outlook and perspective on life. And all of a sudden these big career aspirations and these long-term goals that you thought mattered, they now don't matter.
Yeah, definitely.
And it changes you and you start to think, well, life's too short. Why wait 10 years just because that was some rule that everyone came up with in their head?
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
Let's jump into it.
Yeah. So I guess I kept working part-time at Horton & Co. And I also took on a few more hours with a town planner, which was really good. Getting to do some like approvals and getting my head around LEPs and DCPs. And
now, I think it's important. You brought up the role of a town planner. And so far we've covered quite a lot of different professions leading into building and that side of things in terms of this podcast. But I think that's probably a good point to bring up a town planner's role in the construction process. So could you maybe share for our listeners what does a town planner actually do with their role in the project side of things?
Yeah, so we would prepare, I guess, reports and documentation. So we would get jobs from architects or just from people themselves. And so we would prepare sort of, I guess, supporting evidence as to why something should be approved.
So I guess an architect predominantly designs a project, so and a lot of the firms also offer that planning and development stage. Now, an architect who may have just had a client approach them who they've just acquired a site, they may engage them, and if the site's sort of driven or has a few hairs on it, or if a site's been driven by development, like they're trying to squeeze as many apartments on this site as possible, or it might have multi-uses. A town planner's really where they come in, isn't it? To talk about zoning and planning issues.
And so to work within the statutory guidelines and help the architect sort of manage their way through all the different guidelines and rules that there are and come up with
It's almost like a helicopter view of the site, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Like a town planner's role.
Yeah, and then I guess putting together all the documentation and the arguments to support why something should be approved on a merit basis, I guess. So that was, a pretty good experience. So now I know when I have my own jobs how to argue them.
How to get them through.
Yeah, exactly.
Across the line.
Know the right things to say.
All right, so you had this life-changing moment. You had come up with this concept of Brick Design Studio. Where did the name Brick Design Studio come from?
So my dad actually came up with it. So brick, B-R-I-K, is just curb backwards. So name curb. Yeah. So it's just
very
brick.
Clever.
Yeah. Some people still want to say Y brick, like Kirby backwards. So it's really not right. I sort of just on the back burner had a few little things that I would, draw up something for a friend, or, someone at mum's work would need a deck drawn, so I'd kind of just do those things in my own time. I guess I wasn't really decided as to what direction I wanted to go, so I actually eventually went and got a full-time job with a big architecture firm in town, but I only lasted 5 months there because I just, it was a good experience, but again, big projects, sitting at a desk 40 hours a week and not getting any one-on-one with clients, not going to any meetings, not going to site. So,
and I can tell that, knowing a bit of your history, going to a selective school, you obviously operate at a high intellectual level, so you're craving that constant creativity or that constant stimulation.
Yeah, and I just wasn't finding that I was getting that. And I think the personal connections are really important to me. I like knowing my clients and knowing their story and, knowing about their grandkids and that kind of stuff. So I just wasn't getting that. And I just took the leap and said, okay, I'm going to do my own thing full time.
We on Build Hatch, we often talk from a builder's perspective, where a carpenter spends 80% of their time on site and then, say, goes into the office and becomes a builder, and then they lack that motivation because they like to be outdoors working and doing the practical work. And so when they become a builder, they suddenly crave that because they're not doing it as much. So I guess from an architect's perspective as well, I'd imagine working for those larger firms, you're constantly trying to strive for that stimulation and that client interaction. So it's a similar analogy and similar principle when thinking about that from an architect's perspective.
Yeah, and I think at a big firm, being a graduate, you're a few years away from getting to be on site and getting to be the main point of call.
It's similar to the legal industry as well, where paralegal, associate or graduate, then senior associate, and then you get to spend a lot more time with clients when you make partner level. Like it's a similar hierarchy type of structure in those bigger firms. Yeah,
it seemed like a long road to get where I wanted in a bigger firm. And coming from Horton & Co., where it was just the two of us, so I was involved at every stage, and I was involved with talking to consultants and going to meetings. I guess I really longed for that again. So
I think being an architect and working for yourself, it's one of those jobs where it looks so attractive looking inside from the outside. Like you get to work really good hours, engage with clients, create something that they want. Like it's the sexy end of building, like from a builder's perspective, if I could put it like that.
It is sometimes. At the moment, like it's pretty good. I have a few exciting projects on, and I have a good relationship with Sam Horn, who set me up with my first few jobs. We had a bit of a relationship. I'd done a bit of drafting for him in the past, and he had an idea of getting some stuff of his own going and some off-the-plan kind of projects. So I kind of ran with that, and that led to a bit more Instagram and just having things to put on Instagram, I guess, and us working together. And, that sort of also just bringing in other jobs from other places. So I was kind of at the point where I had a lot of people reaching out and I could go it alone.
So I think that's important to note, that you're able to team up with a builder to get a bit more, I guess, practical coverage within your business.
Yeah, so teaming up with Sam has meant that I guess we can both work together to create something for both of our businesses.
So you can collaborate, and you have yourself as an architect or building designer, and then Sam Horn, who was a previous guest on our show, he's a practical builder. So both of you have recognised the benefits of teaming up together and throwing work to each other, or vice versa, being involved in the same project together as a package.
Yeah, so I guess it just started with one project that, I designed and Sam built at the Vintage, and then we realised that we get along and we have sort of similar tastes and similar values, and Sam's wants to head his business in a direction towards more custom architectural homes, and I really have an interest in creating architectural homes, so I guess it made sense that we do something together.
Now, I've been inside that house, obviously, so anyone who's tuning into this who hasn't heard a previous episode, Kirby actually designed a Hamptons-inspired home at the Vintage Golf Course, which is in the Hunter Valley of New South Wales. So how was that, designing a Hamptons-inspired home?
It was different. It was the first Hamptons I had really done. And there was a lot of sort of hurdles within that one. The Vintage has their own separate design review committee, which you have to pass even before you go to council. So I guess I found that pretty overwhelming, having to put all the documentation together myself and manage that process. But it was a pretty good learning experience with how to handle people, how to handle, just managing all different kinds of things.
And that's probably where your town planning experience came into the
definitely.
mix.
It definitely helped with being able to explain what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I guess Sam was really helpful in that too, because I obviously was still learning, so I could reach out to him and say, hey, I want to do this, like, how do I do it? How what's the best way? So we would sit down together and kind of go through the buildability of things. And I think that's really important, being young and a graduate, is to have someone who you can reach out to, if you just need to know, will this stand up? Or, will this cost too much money and how can I do it better? So having a few people that you can reach out to and talk about your ideas with is really important.
So I think that's really interesting and a really good perspective to have, because from what I can work out and from the experience of talking to people plus my own business, is that to be a good architect, it's not just about having this really good design flair and ability to design something really, really nice. It's also about having that practical approach and making sure that you can then fit in your design to the client's expectations and their budget.
Yeah.
So the only way to get that is through experience. And if you don't have that experience, well, that's a really good way to look at it, to say, well, I'll reach out to someone who can throw some helpful ideas across my desk, or if I can ring them up and say, hey, what do you think about this? You can exchange ideas and fill those gaps.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Sam touched on it in his episode, that the way a lot of architects and builders work is that the builder gets the drawings from the architect once they're completely final, approved by council, and they're ready to go. And the builder might think, well, maybe we could have done it this way or that way to make it easier to build, or there'll be less steel and be more within budget. So I think for me, to get things in front of a builder or in front of an engineer from the very first draft plan, so that I know that, if there's a better way to do it, that I can incorporate that.
Yeah, well said, like rightly so, and I couldn't agree with you more. What's your favourite part of your job designing buildings?
Probably meeting the clients first up, and that first kind of draft plan that we get together. And just seeing something come to life and showing them what we can do.
So what's your process? A client comes to you, says, Kirby, we want you as Brick Design Studio to design our alteration and addition or our family home. What process do you have in place? Yeah,
so I always like to meet with them in person. I'm not big on trying to email back and forth or anything like that. It's just better just to meet, sit down, and I love if they can show me photos of things that they like, or share their Pinterest board, just so straight up I can get in my head what their style is and what they're expecting. I think it's really hard when you're not really on the same page, and you might have a great idea, but that's just not what they have in mind. If it's an alterations and additions, I would just put together a few mud map kind of plans, so maybe 2 or 3 options of what I think could work.
Do you hand draw anything, like schematic or any
sort of, but
designs?
I use AutoCAD, so it's really easy for me to copy and paste and move things around on the page and just come up with some really quick kind of concepts. And then sit down pretty early with them and talk through the concepts, what they like, what they don't like. to come up with a bit more of a solid idea and solid plan. And then from that stage, I'm pretty keen to approach a builder or someone to get some ideas and some really rough budget kind of expectations.
So are clients, in your experience, are clients forthcoming with their budget? Like, what they tell you, is that exactly what it is, or do you find they maybe cut it short by about 10, 20%?
They're usually pretty forthcoming, and I think it's definitely better to talk to a builder first and pretty early to make sure that we can achieve it within that budget. I think it's a bit unfair to go too far in the process and
put all that responsibility on the architect.
Yeah, exactly. I never want to get to a point where we're ready to submit for approvals and then realise that we're $100,000 over budget.
And it happens extremely often.
Yeah, I think that it happens all the time. So I don't want to put myself or my clients in that position.
Okay, so once Brick Design Studio has undertaken that first preliminary step of some schematic designs, you then check in with a builder.
Yep.
Just to do a bit of a health check, if you like.
Yeah.
And then what about from there? What's the next stage after that?
So again, I guess then would work towards approvals. So whether that be a DA with council or a compliant development with a certifier, depending on the job. And then I usually like when things are in for approvals, then we can go towards more details. So then we can move towards kitchen design, bathroom layouts, even down to, picking taps and all of that kind of stuff to just get a whole holistic view of the project, and then scheduling that, which then helps the builder in terms of their quoting. So having a really solid picture of what's going into this house, so that the builder has a pretty solid idea from what to quote from.
Besides your favourite part of the client interaction, what do you enjoy most when designing a building?
I really like when it comes to picking the touchy-feely stuff and designing the kitchens, and bathrooms, all that kind of stuff I really love. Tapware.
Have you got like a favourite product or material that you just love and you put your little signature in each project?
Not really at this point, and I think that my projects are pretty varied, but maybe I'll come up with one. But yeah, I guess that love comes from working at Horton & Co, and we had projects in House and Garden magazine and all that kind of stuff. So sort of a goal for myself to get some really beautiful interiors in my projects and get them out there. So
this is recorded in 2020. So what do you think's sort of in at the moment that a lot of people are inquiring about?
Hamptons is still a big one. I think especially for alts and ads, Hamptons is pretty popular still. And lots of stone and light colours and blues and greens and all of that kind of stuff, which I think is really nice.
Maybe with COVID, they want this really nice, open, airy sort of outlook.
Yeah, I think so. And I think everyone's spending a lot more time at home, so it's kind of a lot more important what your interior space is like.
Okay, so you mentioned before that you've been working with one of your builders who you work really closely with on an exciting project moving forward. So tell me a bit about that project.
Yeah, so one of the projects I have at the moment is creating some, pre-designed plans for Sam Horn Building. So it's a bit of a collaboration between us. I've come up with a series of plans that Sam can sell and build as his own. And so they're, providing that architectural home for a more affordable budget. So we work together to, understand the buildability of those homes.
Over the years, we've seen a lot of builders and designers do this, and you can see, obviously, the master builders, they try and come up with these concepts where the homes are generally the same volume of materials and the same quantities of materials, but they can be tweaked around a bit to differentiate. So what's involved with this concept that you're working on?
They're plans that, you can pick a plan, but they're fully customisable. So we can push and pull them to suit your different site. Obviously, kitchens and bathrooms are fully directed by the client, and the homes are designed so that they're easy to build. You know, there's no major engineering feats in them, which makes it possible to provide them at a certain price point.
If I can explain it, you basically have like a couple of ranges of a house, and the shell can be configured in a certain way, but ultimately it's more about customizing the internal finishes and the actual finishes of the house.
Yeah, absolutely. So the shells are designed simply and
like, do you go to a client and say, well, look, you can choose X amount of tiles, but the range is between $50 a square metre and $80 or...
Yeah, so Sam would have costed all of that up, and there would be, ranges of appliance packages. So you could go, lower end, middle or higher end. So that would then vary what your price would be. But I guess it's about providing something that's more architectural but still at an achievable price point for the average person.
It's kind of like creating a cost-effective architectural home that's affordable.
Yeah.
But still has that individual architectural feel to it.
Yeah, and is something different to what's on the market.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do. So I take my hat off to you guys for giving that a go, because it is a difficult thing to do, to come up with that concept and to make it work. And if it's done extremely well, it'll be an amazing outcome, because people don't understand or realise rather the amount of work that goes into costing a home. So if you can kind of baby them through that process and sort of manage up the information to say, well, look, here's your limit, here's what you can choose, go do it. And that works in an efficient way.
Yeah. And so the background is already done, the design's pretty much there, the costing's pretty much there. So then the client just has to roll with it.
What's a perfect project that you think, I'd really love to do that? Like, this is my career-defining project as an architect or building designer.
Love to do a home that's smaller. I really am interested in creating homes that are small and efficient, with, taking the budget that you'd have for a bigger home and putting lots of amazing ideas and really beautiful materials into it. So, if someone would, I guess, take the leap to do something tiny.
But efficient.
Yeah, but efficient, and also, amazing materials and beautiful finishes.
Have you got like a favourite material that you love to use?
Timber, polished concrete, beautiful natural stone.
And what about sustainable homes or passive? A former guest on the show, we were discussing passive, and hearing about it, I thought, well, what does passive mean? For a lot of people, they have this concept of what passive actually means. Like, can you explain to someone listening to this thing, well, what is passive? What's a passive home?
A home that, got correct orientation, so it catches the northern light and the eastern light that you want, and it has eaves to let in the light in winter and block out the light in summer. And I guess a lot of our homes, especially in suburban developments at the moment, are just put onto a block.
That's a very good explanation, because most people think that a passive home means it's environmentally friendly or it's energy sustainable. But passive is more like the 100% green tick of approval, if you like. It all comes down to the orientation of the home to take advantage of the morning and afternoon sunlight, in Australia, the nor'easter breezes in summer, having eave coverage for shadows, and so it just and air circulation, like it's like the top end of the stick, if you like.
Yeah, and I guess you see a lot of houses these days that don't have eaves and things like that, and that's obviously not passive and not green, because then the amount of air conditioning and heating that needs to be pumped into those homes. So if you have a house that functions properly and functions a bit like a machine, that you don't need to heat and cool and do all those kinds of things, I think that's probably what sustainable means to me.
Okay, Kirby, so what's it like looking back now on the younger Kirby who went to a selective school, got into what she wanted to do, which was architecture? What's it like looking back now?
Pretty exciting. I guess I've ended up where I want to be, so I'm pretty proud of that.
And that's not an easy thing to do, is it, really? Like, to have like, you've obviously had a personal challenge in your life, losing your sister, but to be able to just aim for what you want to do, to be happy doing your everyday job, and then to actually achieve that sooner than, you thought, well, I need to have this long 15, 20-year career before I can go out on my own. And you've managed to go out, work for yourself, and it must be a very satisfying feeling.
Yeah, it's good. And I really enjoy what I do every day now. So I took probably a different path to get here than what I thought I would, but I'm pretty happy that I'm here.
What would you say to younger people or sort of young architects that are attending uni? What would you say to those guys?
I think find people to work with and work for that care about you and care about what you want, and are interested in building you and giving you opportunities. I think I was lucky to have people that I worked for that did let me experience things and I guess threw me in the deep end at certain times and allowed me to get involved on all stages of projects. So I think, definitely have a group of people around you that you can reach out to for ideas and advice, and make sure that you're surrounded by good people and just go for it.
And I think that goes without saying, but being approachable as you progress through the ranks and you go off and work for a firm or you go out and start your own practice, just being approachable so that people can reach out to you, whether it's builders or architects or designers, just to say, hey, I'd like to be able to run this idea past you, or I'm studying architecture. I know I'm only first, second year, third year, but can I maybe talk to you over the next couple of years and reach out and throw some ideas around?
Yeah, and I think don't be afraid to reach out. I probably held back a little bit, not wanting to look silly or, sending someone a message out of nowhere, but I think people are happy to hear from you and people are happy to help. So send the random message out of nowhere and I'm sure that people will help you out.
Well, just on that now, for those that are listening to this and think, well, I'd like to get in contact with Kirby and reach out to Predesigned Studio, what's the best way to go about it?
Instagram. So Instagram's probably where I'm most active at the moment. So
DM.
Yeah, definitely. My mobile number and my email's also on there. So Predesigned Studio on Instagram.
And you don't even have a website, which is very clever.
Yeah, well, it's sort of something that I guess everything that I want to show is on my Instagram. So
it's become the one-stop shop, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Kirby Licence from Predesigned Studio. It's been really nice to sit down and get to know you and talk to you about your background, and you obviously do some amazing work. It's been nice to talk to you, and I encourage everyone to check out your Instagram page, which is Predesigned Studio, and we'll, as usual, throw some photos up there, and people will be able to go there via our links and reach out to you. So well done, and thanks for coming on the Build Hatch.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that was another Build Hatch episode with Kirby Licence from Predesigned Studio. It's always nice to get a unique perspective from an architect's view. As usual, please check out our Instagram where you'll be able to learn more about our guests and the features of the project that we talk about. Have a great week, and you'll hear me again on the airwaves next week. Thanks for listening to another episode with Build Hatch.
You have experienced a Build Hatch developed production.